Make this adorable jungle theme cake with just buttercream and parchment paper. I'm using my very vanilla cake to make 4 6-inch layers for this because I want a tall cake so there's lots of room on the sides for decorations. This is one batch of my 4-minute buttercream and I'm scooping out about 2 cups to use for the jungle animals later. And for the rest I'm adding green food colouring to tint the filling and frosting. You'll need a buttercream that sets, like my 4-minute buttercream, to be able to create the jungle theme cake design. I'm layering cake and filling to assemble my cake. You could do the design on the top of the cake instead, if you prefer to make a larger, shorter cake. I'm chilling it before giving it a crumb coat and then a final coat of frosting. If you need step-by-step instructions for this part, check out my tutorial on how to make your first cake, and the link for that is in the video description and at the top of the screen. Put the cake in the fridge for at least an hour before you decorate it, to chill and set the frosting. For the jungle decoration, make your own cake stencils with just parchment paper or wax paper, a pencil and scissors. I've drawn these leaves and jungle animals and the link for the free template is in the description below this video too. You'll need a separate piece of parchment or wax paper for each leaf, with at least 1 inch or ideally 2 of paper around the leaf. Trace the leaves onto each piece of paper with a pencil, which writes better than pens onto the surface of the parchment or wax paper. If the paper comes from a roll, it will curve, which makes it easier to use as a stencil later. Cut out the leaves, leaving the paper around them intact to make your own stencils. Now tint some buttercream for your leaves. Since I used light green for the frosting of the cake, I can start with that, adding more colours to make darker shades. Adding yellow will make the green brighter, whereas adding pink or orange or brown will make the green duller. You only need a small amount of buttercream for each of these shades of green. This is plenty for my tall 6-inch cake. I'd say 1/4 cup of each colour would be fine. To use your stencils, let the curve of the parchment or wax paper stencil wrap around the cake, and then spread buttercream over the leaf shape. You'll need to press the stencil against the cake on both sides, left and right, to hold it in place as you spread, and try not to pull your spatula straight away from the cake, because that will pull the buttercream and the stencil with it. Instead, sort of swipe it away diagonally, and that way you won't move the stencil. Scrape over the buttercream a few times to take off the excess, to leave a thin, smooth layer behind. The thinner the buttercream, the neater the edges of the leaf will be when you pull the stencil off. If the stencil has moved during the process, it will smudge the outline of your shape, but that's easy to fix by scraping off the smudge with a toothpick, because the stencil buttercream is still soft, but the frosting of the cake is cold and hard, so you won't damage that. Switch between your colours for your leaves, and as you add more and more leaves, be careful when you're positioning each stencil so that it's not touching any of the leaves already on the cake, because the paper of the stencil will damage the buttercream of those leaves. When you don't have space for more stencils, put the cake in the freezer for 5 minutes, or the fridge for about ½ an hour to set these leaves. And meanwhile, you can scrape the buttercream off your stencils to reuse those stencils. When the first round of leaves have set in the fridge or freezer, add more leaves in the spaces between them. And now that the first leaves have set, it's fine to layer the stencils on top of them because the paper won't damage the cold, firm buttercream of the first leaves. Put the cake back in the fridge or freezer and now make your jungle animals. Just like with the leaves, use a separate piece of parchment or wax paper for each animal. But also, you'll need a separate stencil for each colour of every animal. So for example, for this rhino, I'm making one stencil for the grey head, and then another stencil for the white tusk. You'll see why in a minute. Tint the colours you'll need for your animals. For small amounts of several colours, I like to use a cupcake pan to mix them, so that I only have one pan to wash at the end instead of lots of little bowls. When the leaves have chilled and set, use the animal stencils on the cake, starting with the largest stencil for each animal, so the mane for this lion, the neck and head for this giraffe, and so on. Just like with the leaves, make sure the stencils don't touch any of the animals on the cake. Otherwise, the paper of the stencil will damage those animals. Keep your toothpick handy for any touch-ups, and it's best to do these straight away, as soon as you've peeled off the stencil, so that the buttercream of the animal is still soft and easy to scrape off. Put the cake back into the freezer for 5 minutes, or the fridge for 20 minutes, until the first parts of the animals have chilled and set, so they're firm and not sticky. Then add the details of the animals, which are the stencils you made for the different colours of each animal. The face for the lion, the tusk for the rhino, the teeth for the crocodile. You can add more leaves if you want to, now that you've seen how much of your cake your animals are going to cover up. I'm being lazy because this cake is for my almost 2-year-old and he's only going to see the front, so I'm only putting animals on the front. But you could easily fit 15 or 20 animals onto this cake if you wanted to. Chill again before adding the next round of details, and by doing this in stages, your stencils won't damage any of the details that are already on the cake. I mentioned that a thin layer of buttercream is best for stencils, so that the edges will be neat when you pull the stencil off. But if there's a dark colour underneath your stencil, like the dark brown mane of this lion underneath the light brown muzzle, you'll need a thicker layer to cover up the dark colour underneath. If you don't like the way a detail turns out, just stencil again over the top. For the eyes, I'm using the dark brown buttercream in a piping bag with a small round piping tip, a number 3, to pipe little lines. And then I'm using a toothpick to draw the facial expressions, these smiles. This is a leaf tip, like a number 352, with the leftover leaf-coloured buttercream, and to make the buttercream ruffle, like this, wiggle your wrist up and down slightly as you squeeze the piping bag to push the buttercream out, and pull the bag upwards to pipe. A grass tip is the quickest way to fill in the gaps around the bottom edge, instead of piping each blade of grass individually with a small round tip. Rest the grass tip on the cake board and squeeze the bag to push the buttercream out, and then pull upwards as you keep squeezing to pipe long blades of grass. Isn't this cute? And it's so easy and affordable to make by using homemade stencils. You can keep this in the fridge for 3 days, but take it out 2 hours before you serve it, to let the cake and buttercream warm up to room temperature, and that's when it will taste the best. Thanks for watching. Visit my cake school on BritishGirlBakes.com to learn hundreds more cake decorating techniques and designs.